This is a WKYT podcast.
Good morning from WKYT News and welcome to Kentucky Newsmakers. I'm Bill Bryant. Today, a conversation with 6th District Congressman Andy Barr just before he returns to Washington, where tough issues are swirling. Obviously, the military action in the Middle East has grabbed our attention this weekend, and we'll discuss that. The Democratic-led House has voted to impeach President Trump, but has not sent the articles to the Senate yet for a trial. Barr, who is a Republican from Lexington, strongly spoke out against and voted against impeachment. Hotspots have flared up around the world. Again, the threats in North Korea and the demonstrations at that embassy in the Middle East and the other actions of this week. Here at home, the new spending bill signed by the president included raising the age to buy tobacco products or e-cigarettes from 18 to 21. The FDA is taking some other steps in that regard as well. The congressman is also working on horse racing legislation and an effort to help veterans cope after their service to the country. With all that, we're set for an interesting year ahead, an election year on top of that. And Congressman, welcome. We appreciate it very much. Good morning, Bill. As we're taping this, you have received a briefing about what has happened in the Middle East with the U.S. military action there. What can you tell us?
Well, we know that U.S. forces did successfully strike Qasem Soleimani in a convoy at the Baghdad International Airport. I've actually been there and been to the U.S. Embassy, which is quite a fortress there in Baghdad post-war there. And Soleimani, it's important to understand who this person is. Qasem Soleimani was the commander of the Quds Force, or the extraterritorial arm of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, part of Iran's senior leadership there. He was a terrorist. The Quds Force and the IRGC was designated a terrorist organization. He was responsible for killing over 600 American service members in Iraq. He was responsible for fomenting and supporting the Shiite insurgency in Iraq. And he's also in charge of the Iranian proxies. So he supplies all of the material, the weapons, the training, and the additional fighters for Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and again the Shiite militia in Iraq. So this was a decisive action taken by the president, and it was a very, very important, significant victory, a massive victory for the United States to deter future attacks against our embassy. This was directly in response, of course, to the attack recently against our embassy that Soleimani orchestrated, but it was also a defensive move because what we're being told overnight is that there was actionable intelligence that Soleimani was there on the ground in Baghdad for a reason, and that was to carry out additional attacks against U.S. service members and diplomatic personnel.
As a member of Congress, what questions and concerns do you have at this moment?
Well, one of the concerns I have is the fact that we don't have bipartisan support for this president. I mean, we're hearing from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle them using language like assassination. That's the language of Tehran. This was not an assassination. This was a terrorist designated by the government of the United States. This was a terrorist who killed Americans and was responsible for providing the IEDs for the Shiite militia in Iraq. So what I would first call for is a little bit of unity. In the midst of this impeachment, we need unity. The country, our national security is at stake. American personnel that are forward deployed are in harm's way right now. We need to come together as a country and support our commander-in-chief and support defending American interests abroad.
And we'll see where this all goes. And as you head back to Washington this coming week for action on Monday, actually, the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, will have the gavel and will be gaveling in that session of Congress. How does this impeachment situation hang over everything else and every other discussion that's held in America right now?
Well, regrettably, it's a huge distraction, obviously, for the country, and we need to do the work of the American people. Most of my constituents that I talk to, of course, there's partisans who have their strong feelings about impeachment one way or the other, but there's a lot of Americans and a lot of Kentuckians that I talk to who really want the Congress to focus on getting the work of the American people done. Now, fortunately, I think in part because of impeachment, Speaker Pelosi did push some non-impeachment related legislation to a vote. So we were able to finally, after a year, get the USMCA passed. That's great for our economy. We were able to pass a year-end spending bill, importantly, to provide that additional funding for our military, which now that funding seems to be all the more important at this time. We passed a National Defense Authorization Act. Two pieces of legislation that I authored were in there, including North Korea sanctions and sanctions against Russia for the Nord Stream 2 natural gas pipeline project. So there was important policy that was passed, some tax extenders. We got a couple of bills passed for Kentucky that I had authored, the bill to provide racehorses, investors in racehorses deduction, accelerated depreciation, and also for the bourbon industry, a tax cut for them. So that was important, but the truth is, as this impeachment goes forward and as we have these national security threats facing us, we need to move on and get back to the business of the American people.
Being in the minority, do the Republicans have any maneuvers that you can try or do to either get the articles of impeachment moved on to the Senate or to have some, as apparently you would have it, some reconsideration of where things are?
Well, the action in the House is completed from the standpoint of a vote. Of course, I voted against both articles of impeachment for a variety of reasons. But now the Speaker apparently is getting cold feet, and she has not delivered the articles to the Senate. There was all this urgency. There was a statement that we needed to get this done. It was very urgent. We couldn't wait for litigation over the executive privilege issue and the obstruction of Congress issue. We had to get it done. We had to rush it through the Congress. And now that it was a hyper-partisan vote with no evidence of a high crime or misdemeanor, she doesn't want to deliver it to the Senate. And so it just goes to show how unserious this whole and how political this whole thing was. And it just also goes to show why what the Senate is about ready to do potentially is just to dismiss for failure to prosecute.
And so the House vote, as you say, was hyperpartisan. The Senate vote will be hyperpartisan in all likelihood. Is this where we are as a country?
Well, I hope not. And I do want to talk about some I am optimistic that we can continue to get some things done despite all of this. But I think it's important just to address the impeachment issue for a minute, because the American people have been told that the president did something wrong. And the fact of the matter is, back in March, Speaker Pelosi resisted impeachment from the ascendant voices of the extreme left in her caucus. And she did so for a good reason. She said that impeachment is so divisive to the country, it should not be pursued unless the evidence is overwhelming, compelling, and bipartisan.
And you do not believe that evidence exists?
Certainly not compelling, certainly not overwhelming. And the reason is this: because the Democrats in Congress are impeaching this president for following a law that they themselves voted for. No less than 5 times in the last 6 years, Congress, on a big bipartisan basis, voted to mandate the president to seek and obtain assurances from the government of Ukraine that it was countering corruption within its country. Because, for good reason, Ernst & Young says that Ukraine is the 3rd most corrupt nation on the earth, on planet Earth. So it's very important. It's in the national interest, not in the president's personal political interest. It's in the national interest that the president seek those assurances, as he did, to temporarily pause that aid. Not only did the president have the authority to temporarily pause that aid, he had the legal duty to do so. And Adam Schiff, the man who brought these impeachment charges, he voted for those laws. And
so you do not buy that the pause, as you say, was for any political purpose on behalf of the president?
Well, look at the result. The result of the temporary delay in aid was that we strengthened the Ukraine as a more reliable ally in countering Russian aggression. As a result of the temporary pause in aid, the Ukraine took historic anti-corruption reforms. Zelensky and the new parliament, the new Rada, his new political party, a new and untested government, made historic anti-corruption reforms. Now, why is that important? That's important because it just shows that it's very, very important and in our national interest that when you have a brand new government, hundreds of millions of dollars of U.S. security assistance at stake, that it's altogether appropriate for a president to make sure that that new ally, is a reliable ally.
Congressman, there were witnesses brought into the House hearings before the vote. Do you support or believe that there will be witnesses for the trial in the Senate?
I don't know. I think that's totally up to the Senate. What's interesting is that because this was such a rushed process through the House, they didn't allow the president to have counsel present. They didn't follow the precedent of the Clinton or the Nixon impeachment proceedings. They initially conducted all of this behind closed doors without any due process to the president. So the process was bad. The president wants a full trial to bring witnesses. But the question is whether or not the senators who conduct it make that decision. And ultimately, that's going to be a negotiation between Senator McConnell, his members, and Senator Schumer.
Congressman Andy Barr, Republican of Kentucky, the 6th District, with us here on Kentucky Newsmakers. A lot more questions coming up as we head into a very interesting year of 2020. We're coming right back on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. We are visiting with Congressman Andy Barr, who represents the 6th District in Washington. He will be going back, actually, as this program is airing tomorrow on Monday, where things will get rolling. What do you anticipate on that first day of Congress? Members will be coming back. The impeachment situation is swirling. There's been this military action. I mean, there's a lot of drama there.
There's a lot of drama. I think the first and most important thing that will happen is we will be getting some briefings, some classified briefings related to the military strike in the Middle East, in Baghdad, and that's top of minds of all of us. But I think we have to realize, and I hope we can come together as a country and as a Congress, that this was a defensive action. This was not something that was not thought out. This was a president who was looking at what happened with Benghazi and saying, this is not going to happen on our watch. Our embassy in Baghdad was attacked by Shiite militia directed by General Soleimani. The United States, under this president, is sending a message and a signal to tyrants all over the world, whether it's the mullahs or the Ayatollah in Tehran, or whether it's Kim Jong-un, that if you kill Americans, there will be consequences, and America will defend herself.
Let's talk a little bit about North Korea as we do these international topics, and we'll talk about some things internally. But once again, more talk of more potential development of weapons by North Korea. At this point, I mean, there is another hot spot in the world.
It is, and you hear the bellicose and more belligerent rhetoric coming from Pyongyang, from leader Kim, and what we were able to accomplish at the end of the year is not insignificant. We were able to pass legislation that I've been working on for 4 years, formerly as the chairman of the subcommittee with oversight over Treasury's sanctions. The toughest economic sanctions ever directed at North Korea, the Otto Warmbier North Korea Nuclear Sanctions and Enforcement Act. This legislation will target foreign banks, Chinese, Russian banks, Malaysian banks, banks around the world that are facilitating illicit finance. And I think you're seeing a response from the North Koreans right now, because this is going to crack down on a lot of the ways in which they've circumvented international sanctions. And it's very, very important because, of course, Kim is threatening a new weapon. He's threatening more missile tests. But this legislation will give our negotiators at the United Nations, our Secretary of State, more leverage in obtaining the diplomatic solution that we want, a peaceful, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization of the peninsula.
Is the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal good for Kentucky?
It's great for Kentucky. That's why the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce supported it, Toyota, the Kentucky Distillers, and the Kentucky Farm Bureau. All of those groups support it because this is going to be 176,000 new jobs in America in the next 5 years. It's $68 billion in additional economic output for our country. It's rocket fuel for our economy. And on top of tax cuts and deregulation and the other reforms that we enacted in the last Congress, this provides the business sector more confidence. And that's why you're going to see business optimism join consumer confidence moving upwards. And I think it's one of the reasons why you continue to see positive moves in the stock market as well.
The addiction crisis has hit Kentucky horribly hard, and you're well aware. And of course, here in the 6th District, we have these continuing overdose deaths and lives and families torn apart by it, and communities. You have pushed for and supported a bill designed to help those who are addicted get off drugs and try to get jobs. And that is often the missing piece. It's like the people, maybe even if they get sober, they can't take the next step.
Right.
Will this address this? Will it trickle down to here at home?
Yes, it will. Kentucky was designated as one of the top recipients of the funding for the Career Act, which was a bill that Senator McConnell and I supported and included in a big package of bills to combat the opioid epidemic. We're making modest progress, but we're also doing other things in addition to that transitional housing for addiction recovery piece, and we're going to be monitoring the grants as they come to Kentucky over the next year. But we also are very pleased with the fact that we were able to help secure an $87 million grant, the healing grant for the University of Kentucky. And the goal of this grant is to reduce opioid overdose deaths by 40% over the next 3 years. That is an ambitious goal, but Dr. Walsh and all of her team over at the University of Kentucky are well equipped. They're excellent researchers, and they're going to do a great job with this federal grant. And we're going to continue to work with our recovery working group in the 6th District, all of these wonderful organizations, not-for-profits, faith-based, some public agencies, to continue to try to get them federal resources so that they can help folks through recovery.
It should be pointed out that some of that money will go to areas who already were trying things locally. They were trying to get things, I mean, they get the priority. So the local areas are encouraged to try to do more.
That's right, and we're encouraging all of the organizations within our 6th District to contact us so that we can help them either with, if they're in that area, the UK grant, or there's other grants, the Kentucky Opioid Response Effort. That's federal money that comes to the state. And we're already seeing the results, Bill, in Powell County, the Spark organization. We have seen a decline of 50% in individuals who are struggling with addiction as a result of that. So we're making a difference.
Many who have served our country in the military end up in despair. And we have a horrible problem with even veteran suicide issues in this country. You have told us that you want to attempt to address that in some way in the new year. Absolutely.
On the heels of the VA Mission Act, which was this historic transformational reform of the VA health care system in the last Congress, now we've got to urgently tackle this crisis in our country of 20 veterans committing suicide every single day because of post-traumatic stress, military sexual trauma, traumatic brain injury, other invisible wounds of war. And what we've discovered on the VA committee is that 14 out of those 20 veterans have no interaction with the VA system over the last 2 years. And so what we want to do with the Improve Act, a bill that I've co-sponsored, is to provide grants to veteran service organizations, outside of the VA that can intervene and help these veterans who are struggling. And one of the amendments that I've passed to increase funding at the VA and then also grants to non-VA organizations is equine assisted therapy. It's a great way for us in Kentucky to marry our love of horses with our appreciation and respect for our veterans. This is evidence-based. It works. Putting troubled veterans in contact with retired racehorses and seeing the therapeutic benefits of that for both is a wonderful thing to see. We want more grant money for that.
As we transition into the horse racing industries, another topic I wanted to touch on right now. We've had 2 more deaths at Santa Anita heading into this racing season, and 9 horse deaths at Keeneland last year. It's a real concern for the industry. You have attempted to get some federal standards, and yet, the localities want to do this state by state, right? Is that is that the standoff?
Well, it's really not a standoff. I encourage and I welcome some of the reform efforts at the state level, and Kentucky's taken some new bold reforms, and I applaud them for doing so, the Kentucky Racing Commission. And you've seen these multi-state partnerships develop to try to phase out race day medication. but we still need federal legislation because we need a national uniform standard that will ensure the safety and the integrity of this sport going forward. Over-medication of horses is a problem. There may be track surface issues as well that may be causing some of these catastrophic breakdowns, but the bottom line for the future prosperity of this sport, which is a beautiful part of our culture, it's a huge job creator for people in central Kentucky, we have to make sure that the next generation of fans have confidence in the safety of the sport and the integrity of the sport. And frankly, our international competitiveness depends on the safety of American thoroughbred racing.
Are you concerned about, I mean, there are a lot of demonstrations right now, you know, against the very notion of the sport at this point. And as these horse deaths have happened, that those are increasing.
They are, and some of the animal rights groups really don't understand that these thoroughbreds are some of the best treated animals in the world. They're very valuable horses as well, and very valuable animals. But the bottom line is, you know, we can't allow, you know, politicians in California shut down California racing. That would be devastating for Kentucky's signature industry. So we're fighting to get ahead of that and make sure that we put the reforms in place that will maintain the integrity and improve the safety of the sport.
Congressman Andy Barr is our guest. Our remaining moments with him here on Kentucky Newsmakers. In a moment, it is a political year. Can you get much done in Washington in that? And also the congressman up for re-election. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We're visiting with Congressman Andy Barr, right now elected in 2012 and up for re-election this year, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But just first of all, Congressman, when you go into a year like this, a presidential election year, every member of the House up for election, a third of the Senate, I mean, how does much get done in Washington in that situation?
Well, honestly, it is a little different because of this impeachment issue that has really made the situation more toxic than I've seen it in my 4 terms. However, I continue to serve as a co-chairman of a bipartisan working group. We're working on an infrastructure letter to our leadership, the Republican leader and the Speaker of the House, to urge a restart of the conversation on rebuilding America. We've come to a bipartisan agreement on that, our group of 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats. I'm chairing the American Worker Task Force as part of the Republican Study Committee. We're going to be unveiling recommendations on how to get more people, second chance employees, people who have suffered from addiction back into the workforce, some welfare reform initiatives and career and technical education, how to fill all those million unfilled jobs right now. The economy is doing great. We have a booming economy, the lowest unemployment in 50 years, but part of that means that we need more workers, and it's a win-win for our employers. They need the workers, and we need to help individuals get off the sidelines and realize their full potential.
Andy Beshear, elected governor of Kentucky, is a Democrat, but you all grew up not far apart from each other. I assume that you can work with him some when that is necessary.
I fully anticipate that. He and I both went to Henry Clay High School together. I was really good friends with his older brother. In fact, I'm meeting with the governor on Monday, and I want to talk to him about some of this federal money that's coming in to fight the opioid epidemic. I'm sure we'll work together on that.
When you ran the first time in 2010, and that was you know, during the Tea Party movement, and then you ran again in 2012 and won. You lost 2010, you won in 2012. You indicated 4 terms would be it for you, and you're seeking a 5th now. Right?
6 terms, but the point is the same.
The same. What changed? I mean, you at that time were for term limits.
Yeah, so look, I still am. I'm still co-sponsoring a term limit bill, but what I've come to understand also is that the larger problem in Washington is not careerism as much in the Congress, it is the careerism in the bureaucracy. And I have noticed that when you have members of Congress who are not there very long, the bureaucrats are less accountable. So I do think we do have a careerism in Washington, but it's not just in the Congress, it's also in the executive branch.
You know, Democrats seem to be circling their wagons around Josh Hicks, an attorney, former Marine, former police officer. Are you concerned that with Beshear's victory and in the 6th district, they may have cracked the code by winning Lexington big, and then they carried also Madison and Scott and Woodford, I think Franklin County in the 6th district.
You know, I think
is it a concern to you?
It's not, because if you look at the governor's problems and challenges, they didn't translate to the other Republicans on the ballot. All of the down ballot Republicans had big wins, so the general trend supporting conservative candidates continues, and it's not as if the governor ran as a Washington liberal. The reality, though, is that the bigger issue is whether or not you call yourself a moderate but take policy positions that are more consistent and in line with Nancy Pelosi and the far left of the Democratic Party in Washington. I mean, what we see in candidates running for Congress against me is that they're recruited by the National Democratic Party. They're for reversing the tax cuts that have given us the best economy in a generation. Therefore, hyper-partisan bills like Nancy Pelosi's socialist-style price control bill that would destroy cures and destroy medical innovation. A candidate who says that he opposes the bipartisan bill that would lower prescription drug costs. And here's the bottom line about anybody who is seeking this office, whether you're for the president or against the president, whether you're for impeachment or against impeachment. The people of the 6th district, I know my constituents, including my constituents who voted against me and voted against the president, they want a candidate and a congressman who will take a position on issues and be accountable and transparent. And for a candidate for office who won't even take a public position on impeachment is someone who's just not prepared to hold this office, someone who's not qualified to hold this office when you won't even take a position on an issue as big as impeachment.
Congressman Barr, thanks for coming. We appreciate it very much.
Good to be with you.
Thank you for joining us for Kentucky Newsmakers. Hope you have a good week ahead.